I thought Jackson Powers did an outstanding job in his 20 plays with his energy, his effort, his physicality. I mean, it was getting to a point where the referees was warning me about, his play style. And that's what we're looking for.
So apparently Jackson Powers Johnson was so physical that the NFL referees actually warned Antonio Pierce. They actually went out there and told him that, hey, your guy's too physical, right? Tell him to tone it down a little bit. And to me, that's crazy to think because Powers Johnson is 21 years old. This guy's a rookie offensive lineman in his very first ever NFL action, and he's already kind of being told to tone down the physicality. That's not really heard of, right? Let's just be honest. For a rookie to come out there and have success and be a bully, right? Play with that mindset where he's literally tossing people is absolutely insane. But we already knew this, right? If you guys pay attention, you guys know we've talked about Jackson Powers Johnson coming into this game, coming into this season, coming into even before the Raiders brought him in, right? Let's be honest. If you guys follow my content, you guys know I was a huge Jackson Powers Johnson fan. He's my number one overall offensive lineman. The guy's different. And we're feeling that already. We're seeing Jackson Powers Johnson, the energy. This guy plays with the physicality, the mindset. This guy's absolutely different. And his actual presence is making a difference for the Raiders. It's one thing if a guy goes out there and throws a couple players. It's a completely different scenario if you're actually going out there and having success. Right? The Raiders' run game for the first time put up a ton of really, really good things out there on tape. Alexander Mattison had 5 carries for 60 yards. He averaged 12 yards per attempt. Brock Bowers had an end around. Tyreek McAllister, Trey Tucker had end arounds. And those guys were essentially scoring as well. Right? The Raiders had a ton of success on the ground. Even Zamir White, right? I know Zamir White had 17 carries. He only averaged about 3 yards per attempt. But those 3 yards per attempt is an average of the 17 carries. 10 of those 17 carries were like 4, 5, 6 yard runs for Zamir White. Right? So even Zamir White was having success. Madison was having success. The Raiders were having success, generally speaking, running the football. And we talked about this for weeks at this point. Jackson Powers Johnson needs to be out there. Cody Whitehair needs to be pulled off the field. And the Raiders need to do something with the offensive line. And they did it. And they had success. So I'm not surprised at all that the Las Vegas Raiders are finally having success on the in the run game. I think the Raiders going up against the Denver Broncos will have to make sure that their offensive line, you can still maybe make a couple changes to improve it a little bit. But the Raiders will have to make sure that the best unit is essentially out there. Because they tried doing that against the Cleveland Browns, and for the most part it worked. We did have a moment where Dylan Parham ended up getting hurt. Some people speculated he might have an Achilles injury. He could potentially miss some time. None of that's really confirmed at this point. I did see him walking on the sideline, which is a good sign. Usually, if it's like a season-ending injury, you're gone, right? You're not going to be on the sideline. So, hopefully, it's not an injury that's serious. Hopefully, the Raiders just kept him out just to make sure he was out. We also had heard that it could be an ankle injury potentially. So, we'll see what actually ends up happening. But there was a moment where Dylan Parham came off the field, did not play. Cody Whitehair came in at left guard. Powers Johnson went to right guard. And I felt like from that point, our run game struggled a little bit. So we'll see what ends up happening going into next week against the Denver Broncos. But Antonio Pierce was impressed with the run game as well. He had some interesting thoughts on that.
It seemed today, for the first time, especially between the tackles, you guys seem to be grinding out some yards.
Yeah, a lot of pride in that group. And we talked about it's been, not the start that we wanted initially in our season, the first 3 games running football. But, credit to these guys, just, listen, let's find the runs that work. And let's keep chipping away at it. And at times, even in the game, there's a 1 to 2 yard run. Then all of a sudden, what was it? You saw a 24-yarder, 17-yarder, 18-yarder, 12 and a 10. That hadn't shown up. We hadn't. I think our longest run might have been 9, without penalties. But I thought, tremendous job by those guys. I thought Zamir backed up, almost, took one. Alex Madison really showed up today. He ran hard. These guys ran hard. I thought we were the more physical team as the game went on.
Overall, it felt like the offensive line had a really, really good day. The run game was solid. But another unit that was solid, and I think this unit absolutely changed this game, was the Las Vegas Raiders defensive line. People aren't going to talk about this. People are not going to talk about the defense, specifically the defensive line, because of the fact that the Raiders had success running the football. And I think that's what a lot of people are going to talk about. But the Raiders, after the first 2 drives of the game, the Raiders stepped the hell up, and the Browns basically didn't do anything for the rest of the game, right? The rest of the game that the Cleveland Browns had against the Las Vegas Raiders, the Browns did nothing on the offensive side. And a big factor to that was the Raiders' defensive line. They had 11 total quarterback hits on that quarterback, essentially. 11 times the quarterback took a big hit by the Las Vegas Raiders defensive line. Christian Wilkins had 3 quarterback hits. Charles Snowden, 3 quarterback hits. You even had Tyree Wilson have a couple of quarterback hits. The Las Vegas Raiders defensive line dominated this game and is not going to get the credit it deserves, but tomorrow we will get into the film. We'll talk about what we kind of saw on tape. But early on, it does look like the defensive line was able to get after it. Janarius Robinson and Christian Wilkins technically split a sack. Charles Snowden had his own sack, which came at the end of the game, and that sack ultimately put the game away, right, for the Raiders. And then Isaiah Pola-Mao also came off the edge on one play, and he blew it up, and we'll talk a little bit more about him a little bit later on. But the Raiders' defensive line wreaked havoc, and what's crazy is that's without our best defensive player in Maxx Crosby, who happens to be an edge player. That's without Malcolm Koonce, arguably our second best defensive player, who's unfortunately out for the year. The Raiders' defensive ends are missing, but yet they still got home against the Cleveland Browns, and they still had success. The defense as a whole dominated still, right? It might not have been how we, kind of thought about it coming into the season, right? A lot of us thought it'd be Maxx, Wilkins, and Malcolm, and without 2 of those 3 guys, Christian Wilkins definitely stepped up, but Adam Butler stepped up as well. Adam Butler is a guy that's been an absolute maniac this year, and Butler does not get the credit he deserves. To me, when I think about Adam Butler, I think about a guy that's just an absolute superstar caliber player. I think about a guy that, he knows how to pass rush. He knows how to beat the guy in front of him. And he had a message he wanted to send to the Las Vegas Raiders before the game. Check out that message.
From the time that the ball snaps, I'm coming off the ball and smacking the motherfucker in the face. Like, that's how you have to play. Like, this is a grown man sport. You know what I mean? If you don't, they're going to do it to you. So I choose to be the aggressor rather than, the punching bag. You know what I mean? So I was just telling them that's the mindset that they got to have, especially being a Raider.
So that was Adam Butler's message to the team, right? He said from the time the ball gets snapped, I'm going to essentially do what I'm going to do. I'm going to smack someone across the face. And Adam Butler did that, man. Butler, to me, is the Raiders' most underrated player on the entire roster. Because, one, from a contract perspective, he's not making, $7, $8, $9 million a year, which is crazy that he's not making that type of money. 2, from an actual impact, right? The guy is dominant, right? The guy's getting after it. The guy's making plays over and over and over again. And it just goes unnoticed. So big shout out to Adam Butler. We'll probably do a film review of Butler's of his game against the Cleveland Browns because he had so many impactful plays. And then another guy that had a really, really impactful day, and it does go unnoticed, is going to be Jakorian Bennett, who actually was seen rocking a Marcus Epps jersey after the game. So after the game, Jakorian Bennett put on his Marcus Epps jersey. So shout out to Jakorian Bennett. Of course, everybody knows that Marcus Epps tore his ACL, which is unfortunate. He was the leader of the Raiders defensive back room. So many people respect the shit out of Marcus Epps. And he's a good football player as well, right? And Jakorian Bennett went out there and rocked his jersey. Jack Jones came into the game and also was representing Marcus Epps as well. He had a shirt on specifically that represented Marcus Epps. So you got the younger guys showing love to the veteran who, unfortunately will be out for this year. But I love the fact that this is where the Raiders secondary is, right? These guys love and respect the other guys, right? They all want, to come together as a unit. I think it was Patrick Graham that talked about it. And when he first got here, it wasn't really a room of guys together. It was like individual players. But now it's a group of guys, right? It's a group of guys that want to be together, that want to play together, right? It's guys that respect one another, essentially. And Jakorian Bennett's been absolutely incredible. And this is one of those things that's been underrated this year. Jakorian Bennett's made so many big plays for the Raiders. Play in, play out. This guy's breaking passes up. He's sticky in coverage. And I will remind you guys, there was a time early on in the offseason, during the training camp process, there's a guy that I know at camp that was telling me he thinks Jakorian Bennett's going to be the Raiders' best cornerback. I will remind you guys of that over and over and over again because some people actually do think Jakorian Bennett might actually end up being an absolute superstar for the Raiders. In fact, Tristan Kuhn here thinks that Jakorian Bennett might be a top 15 cornerback right now. He's been flat out elite the entire season. Shout out to Tristan Kuhn. But I wouldn't disagree with this, man. I think Jakorian Bennett's been an absolute superstar for the Raiders. I think he could easily be our best cornerback at this point. Nate Hobbs might be an overall better defensive back, but I think, playing slot is different than being an outside cornerback, right? I think it's two different positions. And I think as a guy who's a boundary cornerback, the way Jakorian Bennett is, he's been consistent. He's been getting after it. And I think it's a reason why a lot of quarterbacks haven't had a lot of success against the Raiders, right? Statistically through the year, other than Andy Dalton, we played 2 Pro Bowl caliber quarterbacks, right? Deshaun Watson doesn't count. He's really only had 1 or 2 really good years. But we played Lamar Jackson, who we mostly shut down. We played Justin Herbert, who we mostly shut down. That's a big part of it because of the defensive backs. And Trayvon Merrick was asked about it as well. How does a unit that loses one of its leaders, how does it come back and how does it have success? And he has some interesting words to say.
Trayvon, congrats on the win. Your interception helped to set up that DJ Charlo touchdown, which would be the game winner. How did you keep your eyes on that ball when you got it?
Man, I was just reading my keys, really. Got into the middle of the field, was reading the quarterback, and, just tips and overthrows. We got to get those, so that's what happened.
You guys were without a lot of key pieces, offensively with Davante Adams and defensively with Maxx Crosby. Your coach talked a lot about the identity of this team. What identity did you guys show today without those guys? Man, just next man up. We got a bunch of guys in there that no matter, after the seconds or the thirds, they're going to come ready and prepared for when it's game day. So next up man mentality, and that's what we showed out tonight. So how are you guys able to be effective against Deshaun Watson late in this game? Man, just trusting our process, trusting our coaching, trusting what we've seen in the film, and just playing, balls to the wall. So thank you so much, Trayvon. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Nice meeting you.
So as Trayvon Merrick is telling us, next man up, right? That's the approach you ultimately have to take, and he's 100% right with that. Always comes down to the next man up approach, and I 100% respect that. And the guy that actually did step in, you guys know Isaiah Pola-Mao looked absolutely incredible. Isaiah Pola-Mao is where we'll end this video. The guy deserves so much credit as well, because just like Jakorian Bennett, Isaiah Pola-Mao has came in and done nothing but the right things. He's been breaking passes up. He's been getting after it, right? He's been developed, right? This isn't a guy that came from another roster. This guy was brought to the Raiders as a UDFA. He's learned with Patrick Graham. He's learned the scheme, and he's waited his turn. And now he's essentially been called up, and he made a lot of key plays for the Raiders. He had a sack. He had a pass breakup. He was sticky in coverage. He was over the top in coverage. He made it so that the quarterback did not have wide open guys, essentially, because he was always in coverage. He was doing his thing out there. And AP talked a little bit about him after the game ended as well, and he had some positive things to say about Pola-Mao.
Going back to the younger guys, Isaiah Pola-Mao with a sack and a big pass breakup late in that game. And then also Jakorian seems to just keep showing up every week, if you could talk about those 2 players.
Yeah, I mean, Isaiah, and I kind of mentioned it earlier in the week, he's played, close to 250 snaps over 3 years on defense, but primary special teams as well, as we know. And we were just waiting to get him out there, and the opportunity came with Marcus Epps going down, and I thought he did an outstanding job all week of just really being focused, spending more time in the classroom, Gerald Alexander spending more time with him, and then really Trayvon, it's difficult when you just all of a sudden you got a new guy next to you and you communicate. I mean, there's continuity that goes into that as well. But he came up huge and big, and then, JB just, listen, I've been saying it, just, steady Eddie. He just keeps improving each and every week, and I think the best thing about him, as a corner, you're going to get balls caught on you. You just got to move on. And even tonight, ball got caught on, just move on. Then when we need him on 3rd down, he makes a huge play for us. So hats off to those 2.
So, of course, as you guys see, Antonio Pierce had a lot of positive things to say about Isaiah Pola-Mao. And I agree with exactly what Antonio Pierce is saying. This guy's came in, he's developed, he's done his thing. And I'm excited, man, because the Raiders are 2-2 at this point, and the season's not by any means over. And we're not a great team yet, or at least we haven't really proven that we're a great team. But sometimes just stacking up wins and then trying to get better and better and better as you go forward is the way to do it. And I think for the Raiders right now, you're in a really good spot where you can just continue to get better. You can just continue to improve slowly and slowly and slowly. You just keep getting better. And at some point, maybe it's week 5, maybe it's week 8, maybe it's week 12. You might be a 500 team. Maybe you're a 700 team, right? You have a couple more wins and losses. And maybe that's when it clicks. And then you go on a run and, maybe you win a playoff game or maybe a Super Bowl or whatever it is, right? But it essentially starts with pulling out wins in the beginning of the year, especially when teams are kind of riding you off a little bit. And the Raiders' schedule is not super difficult either, right? We have a lot of really, really easy teams on this schedule. So we'll see what ends up happening, man. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, consider subscribing, and I will see you guys next time with another video.